Have you ever wondered whether your faith grew cold, or if something inside you simply shifted its place? Perhaps you still believe, still pray, still walk forward, but without the same intensity as before. This video is not about spiritual guilt or losing God. It is about discerning what truly happened when faith stopped being loud and became quiet. Throughout this time together, you will understand why this season does not mean regression, but transition. We will talk about spiritual maturity, about the moment when faith stops depending on constant emotions and begins to rest in presence. Staying until the end may help you name what you are feeling, ease the inner pressure, and rediscover meaning in where you are now. Have you felt strange for no longer feeling as you once did? Have you considered that perhaps God has not withdrawn? He may simply be leading you in a different way. What if what you called a loss of fire is in truth an invitation into a faith that is deeper, more honest, and more stable? This video is for you who continue even when you do not understand everything. There comes a moment when faith stops making noise inside. You are still there, still believing, still praying, still walking, but something has changed in the volume of the experience. What once came as intensity now appears as silence. It is not a silence that feels comfortable right away. It is a silence that feels unfamiliar. It creates the sense that something has shifted internally, even without a clear loss or a conscious sense of distance. At that point, many people begin to look at themselves with suspicion. Faith is still present, but it no longer announces itself through strong emotions, easy tears, or that clear feeling of spiritual enthusiasm. And when this happens, the first interpretation is almost always harsh. Something is wrong with me. The soul tries to find a quick explanation for the change, and the most common explanation becomes guilt. The absence of emotion starts to be interpreted as the absence of God. Memories of the past grow heavy. You remember how you used to feel, how everything once seemed more intense, more alive, more obvious. Without noticing, you begin to measure the present with the ruler of what once was. And the more you compare, the stronger the quiet pressure becomes to feel again. Yet this way of measuring faith has always been fragile, even when it felt reliable. Emotions are natural responses, but they are not the foundation of faith. They accompany seasons, contexts, and processes. When spirituality matures, something begins to reorganize within. Faith stops leaning on impact and begins to be sustained by constancy. There is an ancient passage that reveals this with almost unsettling clarity. When Elijah expected to find God in the extraordinary, the text says, "The Lord said, 'Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by.' Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper." 1 Kings 19:11-12. God was there the whole time, just not where Elijah expected. This scene reveals something profound about spiritual transition. Silence does not mean absence. It signals a change of language. God has not stopped revealing himself. He has simply stopped using noise as the primary way. The heart that once recognized God through impact is now invited to recognize him through permanence. When silence arrives, the inner ear must learn a different kind of listening. It is uncomfortable because it dismantles old reference points. Loud faith gave a sense of control. Silent faith requires trust. It does not impose itself through emotion. It establishes itself through continuous presence. That is why this season often feels so strange. You are still walking, but without the same enthusiasm. You still believe, but without the same sensory fervor. And perhaps this is not a sign of cooling, but the beginning of a deeper adjustment. a place where faith begins to stand without needing to prove itself. Here, silence is not a void to be filled in a hurry. It is a space of transition, a ground where the soul learns to remain without depending on noise. And this learning still holds layers that need to be discerned with calm, without haste, and without judgment. A common confusion settles in when emotion fades. The idea that faith has faded as well, as if believing were the same as feeling, and as if the absence of sensation meant the absence of God. In that moment, the heart begins to judge itself quietly. You still pray, still walk, still choose to remain, but inside, an uncomfortable question arises. Why don't I feel as I used to? There is a kind of faith that needs constant stimulation to stay alive. It feeds on frequent confirmations, quick answers, perceptible experiences that reinforce the certainty that God is near. This faith is not false. It is simply early. It serves its purpose in certain seasons, but it was never meant to sustain the entire journey. When God decides to deepen, he gently begins to remove some emotional crutches. This removal is often interpreted as loss, but in truth, it is strengthening. God does not reduce faith when he removes excess stimulation. He repositions it. What once needed to be felt now needs to be trusted. The path stops being guided by emotion and begins to be sustained by the quiet decision to continue. This is where walking becomes more demanding. You move forward without excitement, without that clear inner sense of security. There is no euphoria, no visible signs, no immediate emotional reward. And still, you remain. The Apostle Paul describes this kind of passage with both simplicity and depth when he says, "For we live by faith, not by sight," 2 Corinthians 5:7. Faith shifts from the realm of perception into the realm of trust. When God allows emotion to diminish, he is not testing your endurance or measuring your spiritual strength. He is teaching something deeper, how to trust without constant confirmation. Sensory faith responds to what happens. Mature faith remains even when nothing happens. It learns to sustain the relationship without depending on stimulation. There is a quiet danger in confusing intensity with depth. What is intense draws attention, but what is deep sustains. Strong emotions can coexist with fragile roots. Faith that passes through seasons without sensation, however, learns to anchor itself in something more stable than enthusiasm. Trust built over time, through repetition and constancy. That is why this season produces insecurity. You look inward and no longer recognize the emotional landscape you once called faith. It feels empty, neutral, too quiet. But often it is not emptiness. It is foundation, not absence, but support. Something that once needed to be felt begins to exist on its own. Perhaps you are not losing something precious, but being invited to trust in a more honest way, less dependent on feeling. A kind of faith that does not need to be proven every day in order to remain alive. A kind of faith that stays even when the heart offers no clear signals. There are still layers of this process to be revealed with patience, and they continue to unfold as you keep going. There are moments when God does not withdraw. He simply changes the way he reveals himself. What once came through clear signs begins to arrive in simpler, almost discreet ways. Not because his presence has diminished, but because the relationship has matured. A growing soul learns to recognize God without needing constant external proof, like someone who can identify a familiar voice even when it speaks softly. This shift often causes confusion because it breaks old expectations. You expected to feel, to perceive, to confirm. You expected faith to be accompanied by something visible, something you could point to as concrete proof that God was near. When that does not happen, a sense of distance arises. But many times, it is not distance, it is deepening. God does not move away when he changes the method. He draws closer in a way that depends less on stimulation. The heart misses what was familiar. What once sustained the journey now seems not to work anymore, and that creates insecurity. A quiet question surfaces. If God is with me, why don't I feel it? This question is not a lack of faith. It is a sign of transition. Something old has stopped sustaining you, and something new is still learning how to take its place. There is a word of Jesus that illuminates this passage with gentleness. After Thomas needed to see in order to believe, Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. There is no reproach in this encounter, only an invitation into a faith that no longer depends on immediate evidence, but is sustained by trust built through relationship. God does not form maturity by keeping the soul dependent on constant signs. In certain seasons, he reduces the extraordinary to strengthen what is essential. Fewer visible manifestations, more continuous presence, less emotional impact, more inner stability. The relationship slowly stops revolving around what God does and begins to rest in who He is. This divine pedagogy may seem difficult at first, especially for those accustomed to perceiving God through intense emotions, but it is deeply careful. God does not remove the sensory to punish or to test limits. He removes it in order to form. He teaches the heart to remain when there are no spiritual novelties, when the days feel too ordinary to seem sacred. In this process, faith begins to shift from enthusiasm to constancy. The heart learns to rest in presence rather than sensation. It learns that God remains in simple prayers, in repeated gestures, in a journey without immediate answers. Faith stops demanding signs and begins to recognize companionship. Perhaps you are exactly at this point, a place where God no longer appears as He once did and yet remains faithful. A place where faith is being invited to trust without depending on what it sees or feels. There are still layers of this path that need to be noticed with patience, and they continue to unfold, step by step, as you keep going. There comes a point in the journey when the old form of faith no longer sustains you, even though it was true in its time. What once worked begins to feel insufficient, not because it was false, but because it fulfilled its purpose in that season. This moment is often confusing because the soul senses that something has ended without being able to name exactly what has begun. It feels like a transition without a map, as though familiar ground has been left behind. Childlike faith is not a mistake. It is a stage. It is born from the need to feel, to see quick answers, to perceive God clearly and immediately. For a time, this is care. But as the heart grows, God stops leading primarily through emotion. What once came as an obvious sensation now appears as inner responsibility. And that can be frightening, because it requires conscious presence rather than constant stimulation. There is a kind of maturity that arrives by dismantling old reference points. You realize that you no longer react as before, that certain words no longer have the same effect, that some practices have lost their emotional impact. The old way of believing begins to feel too small to sustain what you are living now. And this realization is not painless. It carries a quiet grief for what was familiar. The Apostle Paul describes this transition with disarming honesty when he says, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." 1 Corinthians 13:11. There is no contempt for the past in these words. There is recognition of growth. Something was left behind because something greater needed to be born. Growing spiritually is not always gentle. Sometimes it is disorienting. There is longing for the faith that came easily, for the experience that announced itself without effort. But there is also a quiet calling to remain without depending on what no longer sustains. God is not demanding more from you, He is trusting you more, trusting that you can continue even without the old supports. At this point, many try to go back. They try to recreate sensations, repeat formulas, search again for what once worked. But faith does not mature by repeating the past. It matures by accepting the present. What was left behind does not need to be recovered. It needs to be honored as part of the path that brought you here. Perhaps this is an invitation to stop resisting the change and allow faith to take on a more mature form of existence. If this content is helping you recognize this transition, consider staying with us until the end of the video, subscribing to the channel, and, if it feels right, leaving a simple sign, a quiet comment, or a subscription, as if to say, "I am still here." There is still more to be understood in this journey, and it continues to unfold with calm. There comes a moment when faith stops being something you feel and becomes something you live. It no longer announces itself through obvious emotions, nor is it confirmed by constant inner sensations. Slowly, spirituality moves from the realm of intense experience into the territory of everyday life. And at first, this can seem less spiritual, when in truth, it is deeper and more real. When faith was sensory, it came with enthusiasm. There was a clear emotional reward. You felt you were on the right path, that God was near, that everything made sense. Now, that confirmation does not always come. You do what needs to be done without inner applause, without that comforting sense of alignment. And this creates a quiet unease. If I don't feel it, is it still faith? It is precisely here that maturity begins to reveal itself. Remaining faithful when there is no emotional return requires more than enthusiasm. It requires constancy. Faith stops depending on the state of the heart and begins to express itself through choices. You continue to pray, continue to act with integrity, continue to love, even when the heart feels neutral, tired, or confused. There is a spiritual sobriety in this stage. Faith no longer needs constant stimulation in order to exist. It is sustained by the daily decision to remain, even when the inner world does not respond with enthusiasm. This is not coldness, it is depth. It is not distance, it is rootedness. James describes this reality directly and without theatrics when he writes, "In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." James 2:17. Not as an accusation, but as a mirror. Living faith is not proven by how strongly it is felt, but by how it shows itself in simple, repeated, quiet actions. It appears in how you live when no one is watching. At this stage, God seems to value constancy more than enthusiasm, quiet faithfulness more than intense emotion. He observes those who remain when the extraordinary does not happen, those who keep walking when the heart offers no encouragement at all. Spirituality stops being an event and becomes a way of existing. This can give the impression that faith has lost its brightness, that something has gone out, but perhaps it has only changed its place. Less dependent on environment, less vulnerable to inner fluctuations, more grounded. Practical faith does not draw attention, it sustains. It does not impress, it remains. Perhaps you are living exactly this transition, a faith that no longer needs to be felt in order to be lived. A spirituality expressed in the quiet commitment to continue day after day. There are still other layers of this process that need to be touched with care, and they continue to open gently as the journey goes on. There is a phase when you look inward and no longer recognize yourself spiritually. Old reference points no longer explain what you are feeling now. The way you believe, pray, wait, and trust feels different, almost unfamiliar. It is not that faith has disappeared, it is that the inner place where it rests has changed. And this shift creates a quiet sense of displacement, as if you are still on the right path, but without the map that once guided your steps. When the old way of believing no longer sustains you, a discomfort arises that is hard to explain. You try to fit yourself back into what once worked, repeat practices, search for familiar feelings. But something does not respond. The heart no longer settles into the old form. There is an attempt to return, not out of rebellion, but out of longing for what was familiar, and the more you try to force the fit, the clearer it becomes that something has changed. This feeling of not recognizing yourself is not spiritual failure, it is part of the process. Before God gives shape to what is new, He allows a season of indefinition, a space where old certainties no longer hold and new ones are not yet clear. It is uncomfortable, but fertile. A place where the soul learns to remain without labels, without ready-made answers. God Himself names this movement when He says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." Isaiah 43:19. The new begins before it is understood. It first appears as a sense of displacement, then as possibility, and only later as something recognizable. The discomfort grows because the new does not yet have clear contours. You sense that something is being formed, but you cannot explain what it is. There is no map, no immediate confirmation, no clear sign of arrival. There is only the invitation to keep trusting while the path is still being opened. This is one of the most delicate crossings of spiritual maturity. In this phase, the temptation to go back often comes disguised as nostalgia, longing for when everything felt simpler, clearer, safer. But going back does not bring rest. It only prolongs the transition. God is not asking you to understand everything now. He is inviting you to remain while understanding has not yet arrived. Learning to trust without a map requires a different kind of surrender. Less control, less need to explain the process, more willingness to walk at the pace of what is being formed within. This is not abandonment of the path, it is a deepening of it, a quiet adjustment between who you were and who you are becoming. Perhaps you are exactly in this in-between place. It is no longer as it was, but it is not yet clear what it will be. And this is not a sign of error, but of movement. Something new is being prepared, even if you cannot yet recognize it. The path continues to open, step by step, in the right time, as you remain. There is a kind of faith that only reveals itself when time stretches on and nothing seems to change. There are no new signs, no visible answers, no events that confirm progress. The scene remains the same day after day, and still you remain. This quiet persistence does not draw attention, does not produce remarkable stories, does not generate immediate emotion, yet it sustains the journey in a profound way. Remaining when there is no spiritual applause requires a strength that is not emotional. There is no excitement to push you forward, no urgency to speed things up. There is only the repeated decision to continue, even when the heart longs to see something different. This invisible discipline is not born from rigidity, but from matured faithfulness. It is choosing to stay when it would be easier to give up out of weariness. On the outside, everything looks the same. Routine continues, days repeat themselves, challenges do not disappear, questions remain open without clear answers. But on the inside, something begins to organize itself slowly. Faith starts to settle in a more stable way, less reactive to circumstances. It stops oscillating with what happens and begins to anchor itself in what remains, even when the scene does not change. There is a word that carries this kind of waiting with serene clarity. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. Hebrews 10:36. Perseverance here does not mean forcing results or accelerating processes. It means sustaining the walk while time does its quiet work. It is continuing without rushing toward immediate outcomes. This passage teaches something essential about faith. It is not measured by how much happens, but by how well it remains when nothing happens. The heart learns not to negotiate its trust based on external changes. It learns that continuing is itself a profound spiritual act, even when there is no sense of progress. Over time, something shifts without making noise. Anxiety lessens, hurry loses its grip. The need to see results slowly gives way to a calmer trust. Faith learns to move through long seasons without losing itself within them. There is no spectacle, only sustenance. There is a kind of maturity that only forms in this extended space. Faith stops searching for shortcuts and accepts the slow rhythm, the repetition of days, the absence of novelty. And almost without noticing, it begins to carry a firmer peace, less dependent on quick answers, a peace that does not come from what changes, but from what remains. Perhaps you are living exactly this stretch of the path. A time when everything seems the same on the outside, yet something is being consolidated within. This is not stagnation. It is passage. Faith that learns to wait without urgency still has something to reveal. And this process continues quietly in the right time. There is a kind of inner work that God only does when emotions no longer occupy the center of the spiritual experience. When feeling no longer guides every step, he begins to form something deeper and more lasting: character. This work is not immediately visible nor comfortable while it is happening. It unfolds slowly, quietly, and often goes unnoticed until its effects begin to appear. Sensations come and go. Emotions fluctuate with fatigue, context, and the circumstances of the day. Character does not. It is formed when you continue choosing what is good without inner incentive, when you remain upright without emotional reward, when you keep trusting without immediate relief. God does not ignore what you feel, but he does not build maturity on what changes all the time. There is a spiritual logic that only becomes clear over time. The Apostle Paul describes this path with clarity and honesty when he says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." Romans 5:3-4. Nothing here happens instantly. Each stage prepares the next without shortcuts or artificial acceleration. God is not interested only in easing what you feel right now. He is deeply committed to who you are becoming along the way. That is why, in certain seasons, he allows discomfort to remain, not as punishment nor as abandonment, but as an environment for formation. Faith stops being sustained by emotion and begins to be shaped by quiet perseverance. This kind of formation does not draw attention. It does not produce immediate testimonies or striking experiences to tell. It happens beneath the surface, in repeated choices, in patience that grows unnoticed, in the ability to continue when no one is watching. Character is formed when there is no external validation, when faith must stand without applause. With time, something begins to settle within. Hope no longer depends on what is happening around you, but on what has been built inside you. It is not a euphoric hope, full of passing enthusiasm, but a steady one. It is not born from emotional impact, but from matured trust that has learned to remain. Perhaps you are living exactly this kind of formation now, a season in which God seems less concerned with how you feel and more devoted to who you are becoming. If this message is helping you understand this process, consider supporting the channel with a simple gesture, a subscription or a quiet comment, so that this message can continue reaching other hearts in transition. There is still more to be revealed on this path that moves forward with calm and purpose. There is a presence that does not depend on how much you feel. It does not announce itself through intense emotions, nor is it confirmed by constant signs. It simply remains. As faith matures, the heart begins to realize that God is not measured by momentary perception, but by a steady faithfulness that sustains even on days when nothing seems to happen. In earlier stages, feeling was almost synonymous with believing. The absence of sensation created insecurity, doubt, an effort to produce something internally. Now, something slowly shifts. You begin to learn, little by little, that God's presence does not fluctuate with your inner state. He does not draw nearer when you feel more, nor withdraw when you feel less. The relationship stops being regulated by experience and begins to rest in trust. There is a simple and firm promise that carries this kind of maturity. Jesus said, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Matthew 28:20. There is no condition in that statement, no requirement of emotion, spiritual performance, or clear perception, only guaranteed presence, a presence that sustains even when it is not felt, even when it is not perceived. This truth begins to quietly reorganize the inner world. Faith stops being a constant search for signs and becomes a resting place in the promise. God remains present when prayer feels too simple, when words are scarce, when the heart is still. Presence does not diminish because perception has diminished. It remains whole. At this stage, faith becomes relationship, not experience. It leans more on the word than on feeling. And this produces a different kind of security, less spiritual anxiety, less need to prove something, less fear of doing it wrong, because you no longer feel as before. Trust stops being emotional and becomes relational. Resting in this presence is not indifference or passivity, it is matured trust. It is knowing that God remains even when the inner world does not react, even when the soul offers no immediate response. Faith learns to exist without needing constant validation through sensations. Perhaps this is one of the most subtle and most liberating transitions of the entire journey. Recognizing that God is with you even when you do not perceive it, that presence does not depend on feeling, that the relationship remains firm even in silence. There is still one final movement along this path, a place of deeper quiet and rest that begins to emerge when faith no longer needs to prove anything. There is a stage where faith becomes quieter, but not because everything has been resolved. The silence that appears here is not closure. It is deceleration. The soul begins to move at a different pace, without haste, without the obligation to answer every question at once. There is no euphoria, no clear sense of arrival, only a slower rhythm, more honest with what you are able to sustain right now. After so many inner changes, something begins to settle, even if only provisionally. Spiritual anxiety softens, not because it has completely disappeared, but because it no longer dominates every thought. Comparison with the past loses its grip. Faith stops functioning as a constant demand and becomes a space where you can simply be, even without fully understanding what is happening. The psalmist describes this state with a delicate image that speaks not of an ending, but of an inner posture. Indeed, I have calmed and quieted my soul. I am like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. Psalm 131:2. This is not the picture of someone who has finished the journey, but of someone who has found a brief rest in the middle of it. This quietness does not remove the tensions of life, nor does it resolve every spiritual question. It simply creates space for the heart to breathe without reacting to everything all the time. Faith learns to exist without defending itself, without explaining itself, without proving itself, not as something complete, but as something still being cared for, sustained, and gently formed. At this point, spirituality becomes simpler in the way it is lived. Less effort to feel something specific, less urgency for intense experiences, more willingness to remain even when the inner world feels neutral or silent. Faith does not become smaller. It becomes more inhabitable, more possible to live day by day. This partial rest is not a final destination. It is a conscious pause in the middle of the crossing, a place where the soul learns that it does not need to run all the time in order to remain faithful. There are processes that continue unfolding even when you feel nothing extraordinary. There are things still being formed, questions that do not yet require immediate answers, layers that will be touched with care in time. Perhaps this is only a moment of quiet before something deeper begins to take shape. Not an ending, but a necessary interval. A space where faith learns to remain without noise, while something continues to be prepared in the silence. Perhaps as you arrive here, you did not receive clear answers or immediate solutions. Perhaps nothing has visibly changed on the outside. The routine continues, responsibilities remain, and some questions still linger without answers. The road ahead may feel too quiet, and yet something may have been rearranged within. Not as a sudden relief, nor as absolute certainty, but as a weight that has become a little lighter, a hurry that has lost its grip, a tension that no longer occupies all the space. Throughout this journey, one thing has become clear: your faith did not disappear. It simply shifted its place. What once needed to be felt is now learning to remain. What once shouted now sustains in silence. There was no abandonment, no regression, no cooling. There was transition, there was maturity, there was an inner shift that is not always easy to explain, but begins to make sense when it is acknowledged with honesty. Perhaps you can see now that you are not broken, that you did not fail spiritually for not feeling as you once did, that God did not withdraw because emotion diminished. There are seasons when He is known through impact, enthusiasm, intensity, and there are seasons when He is known through constancy, quiet faithfulness, steady presence. Both belong to the same care, the same love that accompanies without abandoning. If you can, allow yourself to remain here for a few more moments without hurry, not to solve everything, not to organize every thought that has passed through your mind, simply to be. Perhaps by closing your eyes for a brief moment, perhaps by resting your hand on your chest or in your lap, not to ask for anything nor to prove anything, but to recognize, without words, that you are still here and that God is here too, present, near, sustaining, even in the silence. There is no urgency for the next step. There is no demand for complete clarity right now. Mature faith learns that not everything needs to be understood in order to continue being lived. Sometimes all it asks for is continuity, one day at a time, one possible step, a heart that is honest with what it feels and with what it does not feel. As you move forward, carry only this with you: you did not lose your faith. It is alive, perhaps quieter, perhaps less sensory, but also deeper, more stable, more able to sustain you over time. A faith that does not need to be intense to be true. A faith that has learned to remain exactly where you are now,